When it comes to feeding your family, wouldn't it be nice if you could support your local farmers too? Walden Local Meat offers locally raised grass-fed beef and pasture-raised pork, chicken, lamb, and more, all from highly principled farmers in the Northeast, delivered to you each month. Walden's mission is to build a stronger, more connected food system from the pasture to your door. Learn more about their plan options and monthly specials at waldenlocalmeat.com.
Welcome to Warren Family Letters Home. My name is Lauren Muse, and I have a passion for history and genealogy, looking beyond the names and dates to who people were and where they were at certain points in time. I'm back after a bit of a hiatus with some more stories for you and more letters to return home. During World War II, men and women were deployed throughout Europe and the Pacific with their only means to communicate home through handwritten letters, letting people know at home they were doing okay. We're going to continue our series looking at letters written by these servicemen during World War II. I've obtained the letters from antique stores and auctions, and these podcasts will not only share the letter, but look at who the servicemen were and about where they were and what they were doing at the time the letters were written. It's my hope that someone will hear this podcast and recognize a family connection and contact me. These letters home belong home, with descendants to cherish and show with pride. And I'd also like to start this podcast with a happy update about the episode I did about James Lockett Bowers of Tennessee, U.S. Navy. I was connected to the family just a week ago and had the wonderful opportunity to speak to both his widow and his grandson, as well as receive some wonderful emails from other family members. Mr. Bowers was clearly loved, and he's been terribly missed since his passing. His widow, Sue, told me wonderful stories about what a kind and generous man he was. She told me that she first saw him when he came into a market where she was working. She asked a friend who he was, and the friend arranged for them to get together on a date. The rest, she says, is history. I returned the letter to his family, and they were very happy to receive such a personal family heirloom to be honored and cherished. Mr. Bowers, thank you for your service. Your letter has gone home. For this week's podcast, our letter was written by Seaman First Class, Charles Edward Polinski, U.S. Navy. Charles Edward Polinski was born on May 22, 1925, in Cadiz, Ohio, to Charles and Beatrice Polinski. Charles was the oldest and had a younger brother named Junior. His father was an immigrant from Poland, arriving in the USA in 1908, and according to the 1930 census, he supported his family by working as a motorman in a coal mine. And a motorman's job is basically, he runs a small locomotive in the coal mine, bringing the coal up to the surface. On the 1940 census, we find the family still in Ohio, with his father still working in the coal mines. Charles Edward is listed as 15 years old. June 1st, 1943, at the age of 18, Charles registers for the draft. His draft card describes him as 5'10½", 155 pounds, with blue eyes, brown hair, and a light complexion. His mom is listed as his next of kin, and he notes that he's employed at Rome's Wholesale in Wheeling, West Virginia. I'm not sure of what specific date, but before Charles deploys overseas, he does marry Nettie Dolores Littleton. We find Charles in the U.S. Navy assigned to Landing Craft Infantry, Large, otherwise referred to as the LCILs, and was assigned to the Europe, Africa, Middle East Theater, and he was based in Bizerta, Tunisia. The LCI landing crafts were used by the Allies to land large numbers of infantry on the beaches. It was a small steel ship that could land 200 men and could come speeding into shore with speeds of up to 15 knots. Some, such as the ship that Charles was on, was also heavily armed and were used to provide cover for underwater demolition teams, laying smoke to obscure invading fleets, and also used to provide close gunfire to help protect the soldiers as they stormed the beaches. On December 10, 1943, Seaman First Class Polinski rode home to his family. To Mr. and Mrs. Charles Polinski, Adina, Ohio. Dear Mom and family, every once in a while I meet someone from Wheeling or near there, where this one guy here from 18th Street. Every once in a while he comes up to see us. Last night, Savage, you know who I mean, the boy that we seen up at the Eagles when I was home on my leave. We were sleeping with our bunks together. It was kind of cold, and he keeps pulling the covers over towards him. I was almost over his bunk. Boy, it sure does get hot here in the daytime and cold at night. Right now, it's rainy season over here. It was raining a little this morning. How is the weather up around Adina? Cold? By the way, have you seen Dolores yet? How did she look? Did she look like she was putting on weight, or does she worry about me very much? If she is, tell her that I'm fine and dandy. I'm still kicking. And tell Daddy to keep that new car of his in shape until I get home. That will be in about a year, or maybe more until I get home, but I'll get there. About a month later, Charles's ship would take part in the west coast of Italy operations, the Battle of Anzo, when an advance landing, which took place January 22nd to February 19th, 1944, involved his ship. Troops and equipment were launched ashore, and although resistance had been expected, the initial landings were essentially unopposed. By midnight, 36,000 soldiers and 3,200 vehicles had landed on the beaches. 13 Allied personnel were killed, 97 wounded, but they took about 200 Germans as POWs. The 1st Division captured 2 miles inland, the Rangers captured Anzo's port, and the 509th captured Nettinu, and the 3rd Division penetrated 3 miles further inland. In the first days of operation, the Italian resistant movement had a meeting with the Allied General Headquarters, and they offered to guide the Allied force through the Alban Hills. But the Allied command, for some reason, refused the proposal, and decisions were made that were very erroneous and delayed further movement into Italy. This took away the element of surprise, which ultimately caused a lot of problems for the land troops. One of the other problems with the timing of this operation was the availability of the landing ships themselves. The American commanders in particular were determined that nothing should delay the Normandy invasion and the supporting landings around in southern France. The invasion of Western Italy initially was to release the LCLs by January 15th. However, due to further problems, President Roosevelt granted permission for the craft to remain until February 5th. After February 5th, Charles would have been on his way to support the invasion of Normandy, and his ship would have been one of the first 3 groups in the flotilla bringing men and equipment ashore. After the war, Charles was still in the Navy as of January 1946, but on the 1950 census, we find him back in Ohio. He's a veteran of 2 of the most major operations in World War II, married with 1 son, working as a supplyman at the coal mine, all at 24 years of age. And a year later, he and his wife welcome a daughter to their family. I'm happy to say that as I was researching this letter, I was able to contact Charles's great-granddaughter, Lacey. Lacey told me that she remembers in 2003 going to the 60th wedding anniversary of her great-grandparents. She remembers it was a really good time. She also remembers that her family would visit them each Christmas, and in her words, I remember very vividly that the chocolate pies were my favorite part. It's funny the things that can bring you back in time, like chocolate pies. On August 30th, 2006, at the age of 81, Charles passed away, and he's buried in the Union Cemetery in Dixon, Tennessee. Perhaps to honor him, you could have a nice slice of chocolate pie and remember the brave men of the greatest generation on the beaches of Western Italy and Normandy. Thank you for your service, Mr. Polinski. Your letter is also going home to your great-granddaughter, Lacey. I hope you've enjoyed learning a bit about Charles Edward Polinski, his family, and his military life. All details in this podcast were discovered by research done by me using military, genealogy, and newspaper search sites. The original letter written by Mr. Polinski was obtained by me through an auction site and very shortly will be on its way home. As always, please support our military, both active and veteran status. These men and women sacrifice to protect our country and its ideals, whether in war or peacetime. Until next week, this is Lauren Muse, and you've been listening to War and Family, Letters Home.
Leftovers or the DMV
Number 97
or house cleaning or Chumba Casino always brings the fun. Play over 100 different games online for free from anywhere. You could redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. Live the Chumba life. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.